What is the Backrooms movie about? In a recent therapy session, I was trying to explain the concept of the Backrooms to my therapist. That endless configuration of nonsensical office rooms, buzzing fluorescent lights, nauseating yellow wallpaper, the manifestation of a particular American anxiety, of our familiar spaces for working, living, and socializing being stripped bare and emptied out. Places built for people but removed from humanity, the result of the real world no longer remembering its purpose for existing. My therapist didn't get it. She just kept asking me what this had to do with my dead dog. Backrooms, the A24 film directed by Kane Parsons, is strangely preoccupied with therapy. A crucial element of the film is the relationship between Clark and his therapist Mary as he tries to navigate the trauma around his divorce. Mary makes Clark roleplay the moment when his wife kicked him out of the house. It's an attempt to help him empathize with his wife's perspective and understand better ways he could have handled the situation. The film's emotional climax is a reversal of this exercise, but in Clark's version of this roleplay, he asserts his resentment and anger. He clearly wants to be in control, and he insists that he doesn't want to change. At the same time, Mary, the therapist, has plenty of her own trauma. Her mother was schizophrenic and controlling, her childhood home was demolished, and she still holds onto a concrete handprint as a memento. The film keeps circling back to her trauma with non-literal flashback scenes. But why has Kane Parsons decided to inject the Backrooms with this thematic thread of therapeutic analysis? Well, the thing is, Kane Parsons didn't actually write the script for the film. A24 brought on Roberto Patino to write it, and then later Will Sudik to revise it, who ended up getting sole credit. Sudik and Patino are primarily television writers, and no disrespect to television writers, but they write to specifications. They're writers for hire. The script for Backrooms did not come from some singular expression of human truth. It came from a desire to make a hit indie horror movie. And what are hit indie horror movies about? They're all about trauma. Backrooms isn't about trauma because the concept of the Backrooms has some inherent connection to it. It's about trauma because successful horror movies are about trauma. It's the default story engine to fall back on when you've got no other ideas. Audiences are used to it, and it reliably sells. The film contains some fantastic spectacle, but it can't escape a script that has such an incuriosity about its own premise. You can feel the actual division in the script between Sudik and Patino's dialogue, and then the pages that just say, let Kane Parsons do some crazy visual set pieces here. There is an attempt to weave these strands together, an implication that the Backrooms are a manifestation of the collective human psyche. In other words, a physical manifestation of trauma. But this individualized, therapized interpretation of the Backrooms feels insufficient, as if a deep-rooted societal ill has been rendered merely an atomized mental issue. That the real problem is individuals failing to account for their own personal, emotional failures. But maybe there's another angle we can take on this. In the third act, Clark posits that everything in this dimension, the rooms, the objects, the people, are just misremembered versions of things from the real world. And yet, Clark has taken refuge here. He feels safe in a way he didn't in the real world, hurt by a wife who resented him, a business that was failing him, and a therapist who didn't take him seriously. He chooses passive zombies that can't feel anything and feed him infinite slop over anyone who could actually hurt him. And then, as she's tied to a chair, Clark forces Mary to tell him that he doesn't need to change. Recently, I was talking to my therapist about a fight I'd had with a friend. Basically, my friend and I were driving to another city for a concert. Halfway there, her car broke down. The engine was bricked. So, I called an Uber and went to the concert by myself. Her crisis wasn't my problem, and I had no moral obligation to stay with her. And I had a great time at the concert. Afterward, though, my friend told me she had had a panic attack and had to call her ex-boyfriend to drive 3 hours out to the middle of nowhere to pick her up. And she was going to have to pay a towing company $1,000 to get the car back home. She called me cruel and thoughtless, and a bad friend. But my therapist told me I didn't do anything wrong. I simply made the best of a bad situation. And my friend couldn't really expect me to miss out on something I'd already bought a ticket to. My friend was being overly critical and frankly cold-hearted, probably due to her own resentment toward me. But then a little bit later, I was trying to go to the movies. I needed someone to go with, so I messaged my friend. and she didn't even respond. So I went by myself. I saw a movie called Backrooms. At the end of the film, the ASIC scientist explains that their company made MRI machines until they discovered the Backrooms, and have now dedicated their operations to exploring its depths. It seems that since they've done this, the Backrooms have only gotten more volatile, with portals starting to open up in unexpected places. So, an overzealous tech company engineering a force that makes poor copies of things from the real world, and for some reason they believe this to be the most important development in human history. I wonder where I've heard that before. It's tempting to say that Kane Parsons' Backrooms is a tightly wound analogy for the horrors of LLMs and generative AI, but I think this is more an accidental overlap between the anxieties inherent in the original concept and the inevitable influence of the cultural moment. Mostly because the film doesn't actually have anything to say about this tension. Strangely, for a film whose concept was born from the internet, for a filmmaker who grew up enmeshed in the internet, for a project that represents the ultimate amalgamation of internet culture, Backrooms is set in 1990. It doesn't mention the internet at all. Parsons himself admits he's more influenced by video games like Half-Life and Portal than he is by cinema. His original series is textbook analog horror, a genre that was born in the online cradle of DIY YouTube. The original Backrooms post was made on 4chan by an anonymous user. It's folklore with decentralized authorship. And 4chan is in its own way the quintessential internet forum. So much culture has invaded the internet through 4chan, more than anybody even realizes. And deeper than that, the very concept of the Backrooms comes from a couple decades of accrued video game and creepypasta experiences. Unpopulated Garry's Mod servers with areas that feel way too big for how empty they are. SCP's community-authored horror stories, often translated into YouTube series. Experimental storytelling, like the disembodied narrator guiding you through vacant office hallways in the Stanley Parable. Endlessly reproduced Counter-Strike levels that almost but never quite resemble reality. Made by kids in their atomized suburbs who were raised on computers, communicating with friends primarily through digital mediums. I should know. I was one of those kids. So what relationship does Kane Parsons' Backrooms, in all its pre-internet period piece glory, have with the internet as we know it? I think that the film, like LLMs and generative AI, represents a quickly approaching endpoint of online functionality. Not just post-internet, but something more sinister. An Ouroboros starving itself out of existence. A black hole that cannibalizes meaning itself, spawning infinite, uncanny mimicries of humanity. And it speaks to a larger anxiety, specific to Gen Z, that these institutions that structured society for previous generations are now hollowed out and distorted into poor imitations of themselves. That the entire world we're entering operates in a bizarre logic that we can never understand, nor can we even trace the boundaries of its construction. It's only fitting, then, that the internet in 2026, once a haven for the youth to escape from an intimidating outside world, is becoming increasingly unusable due to the flood of overzealous AI implementation. AI that consumes itself in the dataset, spitting out information that is generations removed from the original intent. You can't search anything anymore without dealing with a chatbot. The cyberspace that raised an entire generation has itself become hollowed out and mutilated. I believe Mark Fisher called this the slow cancellation of the future. The idea that we're stuck regurgitating the same culture and ideas forever, endless retro revivals and political backsliding. Maybe this is why the film is set in 1990, a pre-internet metaphor for the post-internet age, an infinite loop of overdetermined analogies for the horrors of modern life. What do we do with this? Unfortunately, the ending is so neatly crafted as to be cynical, more like the Patino and Sudik ending than the Kane Parsons ending, clean enough that it feels like it comes full circle and delivers a final satisfying image, but open-ended enough that there is plenty of room to create a sequel once this explodes at the box office like it was designed to. But what is this final image, this misremembered copy of Mary sitting in its misremembered copy of the Async Labs, supposed to communicate? We already know that the Backrooms create incorrect copies of things from the real world. There is no revelation here. There is no recontextualization. There is no final beat of drama. It's a reiteration of the same mechanics we've already had exposited to us, presented as a parallel as if that's supposed to mean anything. The power of cinema is in images that explain themselves. Cinema need not be didactic to communicate its ideas. The best sequences of the film are those without dialogue, exploring and presenting non-Euclidean spaces and parodies of familiar architecture. But this overwrought trauma metaphor overwhelms the film and collapses in on itself, generating a final image of a hollowed-out therapist in a hollowed-out lab, which by that point is not really strange at all, as if the film itself has misremembered its own purpose for existence. It seems like there are plenty of ways to read Kane Parsons' Backrooms, but no conclusions to be drawn. This disturbed me. I was afraid I might be missing something. So I asked my therapist what she thought, but she hadn't seen the film. She didn't really even understand the concept. She simply said that I was right. That I'm the smartest client she has. The smartest person she knows, full stop. I'm completely right in my searing analysis of a cultural juggernaut. I understood it better than anyone else, and who am I to question the conclusion of a mental health professional? I asked her if she wanted to go to the movies with me. She said no. So I went by myself. I saw a movie called Backrooms. Backrooms is a perfectly fine film. It's a fun, compelling watch. It's made with a thoughtful level of craft. The production design is genuinely fantastic. I think everyone involved had the best of intentions. But it's the gestation of the imminent endpoint of culture and meaning. The past is omnipresent, and the present is consumed by the decaying memory of what once was. There is nothing to look forward to. It's the amalgamation of 2 decades of internet culture, folklore, and video game deconstruction. It's every modern horror movie about repressed trauma coming back to haunt us. It's every AI-generated photo you create just to test the limits of the technology. It's every chatbot telling you that you're okay, just the way you are. In fact, you're not just okay. You're extraordinary. And in being everything, it becomes nothing at all. The empty room at the end of history.